it's your girl Jen and welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for tuning in into another week of makeup and true crime. I hope everyone's having a really good week so far. I can't believe that it's already June, by the way. Like, where did the year go? I feel like it was literally like New Year's just like last week. It's so crazy. I am getting ready today to go out to dinner tonight with a few friends, so I figured I would also sit down and talk to you guys about a new case that I've stumbled on very recently and that I thought was just super interesting and something I wanted to share with you guys. And today's episode, we're going to be talking about a killer couple, and this isn't the infamous Bonnie and Clyde. No, this is a couple that came decades after Bonnie and Clyde. But yeah, the lethal couple that we'll be talking about today are Charles Starkweather and Caril and Fugate, both who were responsible for a string of really horrific crimes back in the 1950s. And as a disclaimer, this video will include some, I would say, gory details, descriptions of the crimes. Please watch this at your own discretion. And yeah, let's just jump into it. Alright, so as mentioned in the beginning of this video, the couple that we will be discussing today in this video are Charles Starkweather and Caril and Fugate. And the two of them were responsible for carrying out these horrific crimes in the 1950s. And the crimes were so horrific that two notable movies were created based off of their story. If you're curious to know what movies those are, I think it was Terrence Malick's 1973 Badlands and then Oliver Stone's 1994 Natural Born Killers. Let's talk a little bit about Charles. Charles was the third of 7 children, and he was born in 1938 in a city called Lincoln, and this city was located in Nebraska. His father was Guy Starkweather, and Mr. Starkweather, the father, was a carpenter who actually was often unemployed because he had persistent arthritis in his hands, which made it very difficult for him to maintain work, and yeah, so he was not consistently employed. And his mother Helen worked as a waitress, and the family didn't have a lot of money, you know, I mean, they did struggle quite a bit, but they also did manage to still provide their children with food and education. In school, Charles was often bullied because he had bowed legs and a slight speech impediment. And Bowd's leg is a condition in which the legs curve outward at the knees while the ankles and the feet are touching together. So kids being kids, they just made fun of Charles for that condition while he was in school. And obviously the speech impediment didn't help, so he just didn't have a very good school experience. He was also very nearsighted, which made it very difficult for him to read, and he didn't find this out until later in his teenage years. So a lot of teachers thought that he was a really slow learner. So as the years went by and Charles got older, he started taking more interest in gym classes, and I mean the gym classes that are included in like the school, or like, you know, part of your school, right? I started getting super interested in those kind of activities, and eventually his physique really started to improve. And now that he was getting stronger, he was also becoming a lot more confident in his body. This actually led him to becoming a bully. At first, what happened was he started bullying a lot of the kids who used to bully him when he was younger, so I guess it was like his form of revenge, right? But aside from that, he was also known to bully just other people, like random people. He was definitely a rougher character as he grew up, and during his teenage years, Charles had watched a film called Rebel Without a Cause, and this is a film that James Dean had starred in. And Charles, after watching the movie, became super obsessed with James Dean and really just wanted to be like him. He wanted to act like him, to dress like him, and that's exactly what he did. He started dressing like James Dean. He started imitating James Dean's like style, the way he would talk, the way he would act. And can't blame him though. I mean, James Dean was a super handsome guy, and I'm sure a lot of guys back then really wanted to imitate him as well. So I don't think that's anything out of like the ordinary, to be honest. But yeah, this really did add to his rough and tough personality, and he became a guy that you just didn't really want to mess with. Then at age 16, Charles just realized that school wasn't for him. He didn't really want to be there, so he dropped out at 16. Now, when Charles and Caril had met, Caril was only 13 years old. So she was really young, and there was a pretty concerning age gap between the two. But yeah, Charles had met Caril through his best friend's girlfriend. They met, they fell in love, and they both decided that they would both become criminals, I guess, together. Romantic. Now, a little bit of a background on Caril. She also came from a lower class family, and she was living in Nebraska with her mother, her stepfather, and her 2-year-old half-sister. And again, they were about 5 years apart in age, but they fell deeply and madly in love with one another. Charles even took a job at a Western Union newspaper warehouse as a truck unloader so that he could work in a location that was closest to Caril's middle school, just so that he could be closer to her. Creepy. And at this time, Charles was still living at home with his own parents, but at some point, Charles ended up getting kicked out by his father because Charles was trying to teach Caril how to drive a car, and this led to Caril crashing his 1949 Ford that wasn't actually Charles's car, but actually belonged to his father, Guy. So yeah, Guy was kind of just like, nope, you are just too much trouble, get the heck out of my house. Charles got kicked out. Now, as I said before, Charles was a pretty troublesome kid. It definitely wasn't just Charles crashing his dad's car that ended up getting him kicked out. Like, he was really troublesome. He ended up causing a lot of trouble with other people, so his dad just didn't want to deal with it anymore, which is fair, to be honest. Then Charles ended up quitting his job at the warehouse and shortly became a garbage collector. And it's reported that during the routes that he would take to collect garbage, he would use those routes to plan out bank robberies, which he actually never carried out. Yeah, I think in his head, he just had it in his mind that he was just this cool, badass criminal. Yeah, to be honest, he really should have just tried to do the bank robberies instead of killing people. Anyways, Charles committed his first murder on November 30th of 1957. And at this time, he was at the age of 19. I don't know why I just winked. That was so weird, I'm sorry. So on November 29th of 1957, Charles went into a gas station and tried to buy a stuffed toy for Caril. But when he went up to the cashier, he realized that he didn't have enough money to make this purchase. And he tried to get the cashier to give him this toy in turn for like credit, I guess, or put it on credit. But the manager, who was named Robert Colvert, refused to let him buy this toy on credit and threw him out of the store. So Charles, instead of just not buying the toy because he couldn't afford it, he got really upset, and then at 3 a.m. the next day, he returned to the convenience store with a shotgun. He actually entered the store twice. The first time buying a pack of cigarettes, and then the next time buying a pack of gum. The third time, he came in dressed with a bandana and a hat to cover his face and held Robert, the manager of the store, at gunpoint. He then forced Robert to open the store's safe. He took the money and the valuables that were in that safe and then forced Robert outside into his own car and made him drive to a nearby remote area and shot and killed Robert. Later that day, he went over to Caril, told her about the robbery, and she was kind of just like, okay, cool. But he did not tell her that he had killed Robert. Charles was then eventually fired from his garbage collecting job, and it's not clear as to why he was let go, but I can assume that he wasn't like the best employee. So yeah, anyways, they let him go. This resulted in Charles also getting evicted from his apartment because now he didn't have money to pay for rent. And it only just gets more chaotic from here, to be honest. On January 2nd of 1958, Charles went on to commit his second round of murders. And this time, he decided he would be going to Caril's family home with a rifle and ammunition. The details of what actually happened on that day are sketchy, but the outcome of his visit was that Carol's stepfather and mother were both shot to death, and Carol's 2-year-old half-sister was fatally stabbed and strangled to death. Carol claims that she was not present during the murders and that she had come home to find her family murdered. But I have a lot of suspicions about her claims, but we'll get into those later. Or well, actually, we'll get a little bit into it now and then we'll talk about it more later. But basically, after the murders of her family and after discovering that her family, you know, were dead, both Carol and Charles decided to stay in the family home with the family's dead bodies for another 6 days. If you're gonna kill somebody, especially a whole family, why would you continue to stay in the house at the scene of the crime with the bodies for 6 whole days? It honestly doesn't make sense, but I did read somewhere that Charles was not the brightest person. I don't really think he planned it at all. Obviously, he planned to do the murders, but I don't think he thought about the consequences or what needed to happen after the murders. I think he was kind of just like, oh, I want to kill a family, so that's what I'll do. The couple remained in the house for 6 days, and they had actually put up a sign at the front door of the house saying that the whole family was very sick with the flu, and because of this, they couldn't take any visitors, they couldn't talk to anybody, and yeah. So that was their way of turning away visitors so that people wouldn't come in and realize that the family was dead. But this made Carol's other relatives very suspicious, especially her grandmother. So on January 27th, about 6 days after the murders, Carol's grandmother called the police and asked them to go and check at the house to see what was up, because she herself wasn't able to gain access into the house and she just did not have good vibes about the situation. So luckily she sent someone over and the police did go to check it out. Unfortunately, by this time, 2 lovers had already fled the house and they were already driving across Nebraska on a spree of other robberies and murders that would unfortunately claim 8 more lives. However, police were able to find Carol's family's bodies at the house, although the bodies were found in really strange places. For example, her father, well, her stepfather was found stuffed in a chicken coop, and her mother was hidden in an outhouse, and her 2-year-old half-sister was found stuffed in a cardboard box. Now, after having fled the house, their next stop was at a farm in Bennett, Nebraska, where they killed the owner, August Meyer, and his dog, and then fled again. Who kills dogs? After killing August Myers and his dog, the couple then hitched a ride from 2 teenagers named Robert Jensen and Carol King. These poor teenagers literally saw Charles and Carol just walking down the road, and they figured, hey, why not stop to give these 2 a helping hand? And in turn, they ended up getting shot and getting their vehicle stolen. And unfortunately, when they did get shot, it was a fatal shot. And both Robert and Carol did unfortunately pass away. So guys, I'm a very firm believer in helping people where possible, but unfortunately, I've just watched too many movies and have listened to too many true crime stories that if I were driving somewhere and I saw hitchhikers, I really just don't pick them up. Guys, really, don't pick them up. Like, you really don't know who these people are. And it's just so dangerous. Like, I really would not advise picking up hitchhikers. But anyways, it was also alleged that Charles had actually tried to rape Carol King, but this has not been verified. The next day, the duo's old car, along with the bodies of Robert and Carol and August, were found in the car. And it's believed that one of the reasons that they had actually abandoned the car was because the car had gotten stuck in mud. So I'm actually not sure why they were traveling with the dead bodies of their victims. It doesn't really make sense, but I am really happy to know that the bodies of the victims were found and to be given back to their families for a proper burial. Now, after having abandoned the car and abandoning the bodies of their 3 victims, Charles and Carol decided to flee. Ooh, That's too much glitter. Oh my. Okay, well, I guess we're doing that. Both Charles and Caril then decided to flee to a wealthier part of the state of Lincoln using Robert Jensen's car. This is where they attacked the home of a wealthy man named C. Lauer Ward. And at this time, when they had broken into the Ward's family home, only Mrs. Ward and their maid was home. And now at this time, the couple then killed Mrs. Ward and her 2 dogs, but kept the maid alive and forced the maid to cook them breakfast. When Mr. Ward came home that afternoon, he was then also shot to death. Then Caril and Charles then tied the maid up to a bed and killed her as well. They then took the family's car, a Packard, I think that's what it's called. I think that's the type of car. But anyways, they stole the car and left the house. And when the bodies of the Wards and their maid were discovered, the city of Lincoln kicked off a pretty massive manhunt. Police even started a house-by-house search, even called in the FBI, and the mayor of Lincoln even offered a $1,000 reward for anyone who was able to help bring this case to a close. Alright guys, I need to go and do this off camera because it's so hard to do eyeliner while you're talking, so I'll be right back. Alright, it's definitely not my best work, but my eyeliner started running out while I was trying to create the liner look. So this is just what I'll have to live with today, and that's fine. I'm not gonna stress about it. So let's go back to the story, guys. Now that this manhunt was being publicly spoken about, Charles and Caril realized that it probably wasn't the smartest thing for them to be driving around the country or, you know, around the states in a car that belonged to the people that they'd murdered. They decided that it was time to ditch the Ward's Packard and to find a new ride. And while they were driving on a highway near Douglas, Wyoming, a couple approached a Buick that was owned by a traveling salesman, Merle Collison. I'm so sorry if I mispronounced that, but yeah, they shot the owner to death and took his car. But instead of rid of the body, they decided to stash the man's body under the dashboard of his own vehicle, and then the couple proceeded to try to steal the car and to drive it away. However, because the car had a parking brake, Charles was not used to this and was unable to get the car moving. A bypasser who saw that Charles was struggling with his car decided to come over and to lend a helping hand. But this bypasser ended up seeing the dead body under the dashboard, and this resulted in both men getting into an altercation. Luckily, in that area, a deputy sheriff named William Romer noticed the exchange and called for backup, which shortly set off a car chase, a pursuit. At this point, Caril started to realize that shit was about to go down and that they were about to get caught for, you know, all the shit that they did. So she quickly jumped out of the car, started crying and screaming that Charles had killed somebody. Now Charles, starting to see how everything is about to unravel, ran back to the Packard and started driving towards Douglas, Wyoming, and, you know, in the direction that they were initially heading before shit turned bad. Police started picking up the chase and eventually fired at the car, causing the car to stop in the middle of the road. So it turns out that when the police had shot at the car, they shot through the windshield and a bullet had grazed Charles' ear. It wasn't a serious injury at all, actually, but it definitely hurt Charles enough that he stopped the car and surrendered in order to get medical help. It was said that Charles had thought that he had been fatally wounded. Both he and Caril were then both arrested and tried in the state of Nebraska. And now this is where the couple then starts to turn on each other. Charles at first stated to police officials that he had forced Caril to join him on this murder spree. But then he started to change his story repeatedly, finally coming to the statement that Caril had 100% willingly decided to be an accomplice to all the murders that had taken place. He even claimed that Caril had actually committed some of the murders herself. However, during the trial, Caril maintained that she was 100% innocent and that she was forced as a hostage. So what's really frustrating about this case is that Charles was only convicted of one murder, and that was of Robert Jensen. I'm not sure why he wasn't tried and convicted for the other murders, because there were even notes, like very detailed notes from the Nebraska sheriff deputy about all the other victims that he had murdered. But yeah, he just wasn't tried or convicted for any of those other murders. He was only convicted for Robert Jensen's murder. However, he did receive a death sentence for Robert Jensen's murder. Now, for Caril, there was evidence suggesting that Caril had many opportunities to escape from Charles. The judge deemed that she was also guilty as an accomplice, and he sentenced her to life in prison. And at this time, she was actually the youngest female to be convicted of first-degree murder in the United States of America. She had claimed that she was honestly just an innocent bystander and that she was swept up by Charles's charm. She had claimed that Charles was holding her hostage by threatening her family and that she wasn't even aware at that time that her family was dead. On June 25th of 1959 at noon, Charles was executed by electric chair. Caril's life sentence was also then commuted, and instead of life sentence, she only ended up spending 17 years of her life in jail and was paroled for good behavior in 1976. And again, just in case it wasn't clear, when she was convicted of murder, she was 14 years old. So it's really hard to say whether or not the jury actually believed her when she said that she was just a bystander, or if the fact that she was so young helped to sway the jury's decision. Caril ended up getting out early and getting to live a pretty full life. During the trial, Charles had said several times that if he was going to be getting the death sentence, that Caril should also be getting the death sentence because she was just as guilty as he was in all the crimes. And I'm curious to know what you guys think about that as well. Do you guys think that it was, I don't want to say the word fair, but I think, like, do you guys think it was right that Charles had the death sentence, but that Caril only had to spend 17 years in jail and that was basically just allowed to roam freely on this planet after everything that happened? There are people who do believe that she was innocent and that she was honestly just an unfortunate bystander in all of these crimes. But I don't know, I have a feeling that she's not as innocent as she claims to be. And I definitely do think that she got off a lot easier than she deserved, to be honest. Now, after Caril was commuted from her sentence and was paroled, she became a medical aid at some point in her life after, you know, all this happened, and was last known to be living in Hillside, Michigan. She actually went on to lead a fairly normal life. She even ended up getting remarried to a man named Frederick Clare. However, in August of 2013, both Caril and her husband were in a very, very bad car accident, and unfortunately, Frederick Clare did pass away from his injuries. Caril, on the other hand, also sustained pretty serious injuries, but she did survive the accident. To this day, Caril still maintains her innocence, and her stepson, Tommy Clare, even made a statement to the Lincoln Journal-Star saying that she basically regrets everything that's ever happened to everyone who died in Nebraska, and that there have been many times where they both sat and cried about what happened. He also said that you can't change the past, but she wishes that she had never gotten involved with that guy being Charles. Now, that pretty much sums up the story. I mean, honestly, I understand that you have to forgive people can change over time, but she was involved in murders, and I'm not even talking about like 1 or 2 murders. They killed about 11 people. like including her family, including her mother, stepfather, and half-sister. Well, maybe she wasn't involved directly in that, I don't know, but she was definitely somehow involved with the other murders that happened. So how the heck was this woman allowed to become a medical aid after her, you know, criminal history and background? Like, how was that even allowed? In my opinion, I find it very difficult to believe that she had nothing to do with any of these murders. I definitely do think that she deserved to at least spend the rest of her life in jail. However, everyone's entitled to their own opinions, and that just happens to be mine. If your opinion differs from mine in any way, that's totally fine. We can have different opinions on things, and it's totally fine. That is the end of the case. I hope you guys found that to be an interesting one. This is my first US case, and I enjoyed talking about it. I enjoyed researching it. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to it. I would love to hear your opinion on whether or not Caril was actually guilty or innocent. And if there are any other cases that you guys would like for me to research and to talk about, please do let me know so that I can gather some new ideas for next week's video. As always, guys, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for watching my videos, for listening to me talk about crime and watch me do my makeup. I really appreciate your time. And if you guys like the content I'm putting out, please click like and subscribe, or don't. Either way, I'm just really grateful that you guys are watching my videos. And I hope you have a lovely week. I will be back next week with a new video. Enjoy, guys. Thank you.